most people were well under the cutoff of 1 million in terms of just going to any bank and making their transactions. During this period, June to September, 3,172 suspicious transactions were flagged. Now, that is a large number, 3,000, meaning the investigators need to follow this and try and connect the dots. But in this day and age, with computing, with AI, with other techniques, and obviously with very energetic staff, you can deal with this within some period of time. So it doesn't mean overnight. We as central bank got this information. We acted on it. I mean, all the institutions have been acting on the information that is provided to them, and or the information that is kicked up during this process. And we as central bank, one of the things we did is when we saw information, when we saw through our monitoring and whatever other information we're getting, and there was concern with a particular institution, we didn't wait. We went in and did a targeted inspection.
CBK Governor Dr. Patrick Njoroge there talking about the demonetization exercise. In fact, he also said that the value of money that did not come back is equivalent to the value lost during the Goldenberg case. Now, of course, we're talking about 7.386 billion shillings worth that was not returned in terms of old 1,000 shilling notes. We are talking to Steve Biko and Tony Watima today on The Big Story, all about the process and whether or not they termed it successful, and of course the factors surrounding the process that are still ongoing, including investigations. Thank you and welcome back. But there is one thing that we are still debating on, and that is the financial sector and whether or not the exercise was able to bring in discipline to the sector, which was another one of its mandates, whether or not it would be able to curb some of the fluctuations that have been noted in the financial sector. And Steve, I'd like to bring you in first. What do you think? Do you think that we were able to achieve some sort of stability? Of course, we did see that there was not much of an impact of the process in terms of the economy, in terms of the dollar rates as well. Is that deceptive, you think?
I think first and foremost, we need to separate issues and be able to tell Kenyans the truth. The mandate of central bank was simple: change the currency into adherence to the new constitution. Basic, that was it. That was the issue. Have new currency notes with new images and new designs. That was it. The second issue about handling or tackling corruption, managing the issue of illicit channels of cash flow. This is something that central bank actually took upon itself to be able to manage, to ensure that there's more discipline in the financial system. And we've seen Kenya being touted as a financial hub in the region. And 4 months is a long time in terms of being able to manage this. We've seen proper discipline. We've seen better cooperation between the commercial banks, KRA, and other investigative agencies. We've had the CBK governor saying that the moment through the monitoring, anytime they saw something, they're able to investigate it immediately and be able to resolve it. So one, I believe if central bank is given the right political support, we can be able to actually streamline the issues that are facing the financial aspect. Because for me, I think what central bank is lacking is political support. The issue of being able to adhere to the law and the 2010 constitution in terms of new currency, in terms of design and image, has been done. So we move on to the next issue of corruption, of illicit financial channels and counterfeit. These three issues can only be streamlined properly if central bank is working in tandem with National Treasury, State House, KRA, and other investigative agencies. And this is a big question because at the end of the day, we seem to be laying the burden of streamlining the issues that actually face the financial sector at the door of central bank, which is actually being unfair to them because, in essence, National Treasury should be leading the fight in terms of being able to streamline what is happening in the financial sector. And going forward, given the fact that they've been able to adhere to the law as far as 2010 constitution is concerned in terms of the new currencies. Now the next aspect will be to ensure that we have enough notes in the system so that we don't disrupt the economy, so that we don't see the issue of inflation or the forex current account deficit actually fluctuating, or you don't see the shilling actually becoming weaker. And then now we can be able to address the issue of identifying and actually being able to penalize and punish the people behind the illicit channels, and being able to identify and root out areas where counterfeit money is actually being developed. And this is actually the biggest concern, because at the end of the day, given how we are connected globally and given our role strategically in the region, the issue of wash and illicit money has actually become something that is actually very disturbing. And the issue of lifestyle audit to Kenyan politicians and key people, what Central Bank has actually done is be able to do an audit of the system. And the audit of the system has actually been able to raise up a couple of issues. One is where is the 7 billion shillings? My colleague has actually talked about people who are not able to go and access financial institutions. I've talked about the money that is actually being held by the police stations and the court system. We've talked about the issue of counterfeit. This will also raise the issue of how many actual honest billionaires do we have? How many millionaires do we have? How is the money moving in and out? How much money is actually out there? And also this should be able to put in proper focus. Foreign remittances actually coming in, money coming in from abroad, coming in back into the country. Where is this money going to? Where is this money coming from? So I think this exercise, other than just being able to meet the standard requisite of the law, has been able to audit it, and the issues raised, as the CBK governor has been able to say, going forward, I look forward to actually seeing the report that will be done by the multi-agency put together by the Central Bank to actually see what will happen. I'd like to see what Carrie will say about this. I would like to see people behind wash, behind illicit channels being actually brought to book, because at the end of the day, the formal economy is actually suffering when there's a lot of illicit money moving within the system and it cannot be accounted for.
All right, I'd like to bring you in, Tony. What are your thoughts on that? Because according to what Steve is saying, the CBK has actually gone beyond its mandate in actually bringing the financial sector into some sort of stability, as well as going above and beyond what they are mandated to do as it is. What are your thoughts on that?
I think your question is quite broader in the sense that you talk about streamlining financial sector itself. I think there are two aspects. You're talking about the banks being used in money laundering. So are there sufficient laws and implementation of laws in terms of curbing money laundering? I think CBK has done that in this period of 4-month period that we've seen. They've tried to implement quite a number of laws to curb that. The second part is that, which is not part of this exercise, from how I understood it, is that demonetization is used in terms of withdrawing money cash and bringing new money. That's the first thing. The second thing is addressing illicit financial flows, which CBK said this is one of the things they were targeting. The third is always used in trying to control interest rates and being in management of the physical space. This third thing is what CBK has not been clear if this was one of their main priorities. But if you look at one of the theories that I think Steve has completed his argument with, that there is a lot of illicit financial flows moving around that is hurting the formal economy. You look at the numbers itself, and that theory has been blown out of the water, because it means that the illicit financial flows was around 3.3%. So around 97% has been illegitimate money if we take the numbers of CBK on face value. So it means there is enough liquidity to spur the economic growth in terms of money in circulation. 3.3% is not something that will inhibit the growth and liquidity of the Kenyan economy itself. So one of the main things that we'll want CBK will want to provide a context is how much cash in circulation is with banks and how much cash itself is within the public having in control of it. I think my speculation is that a lot of money is with the banks itself, and there is less money moving within the public itself. And then one of the main things that we talk about, there is no enough liquidity moving around. I think that's one of the main things that we'll want to see.
All right, and speaking of the fact that, this is part of the legacy that the CBK governor is, of course, going to leave behind. Thus far, how have you seen his term progressing in terms of the sorts of outcomes that we've seen, moving a little bit away from just the demonetization conversation? Of course, it's part of what he is leaving behind, but in totality, the work that he has done while he has been in this position, Steve, do you think that it is something that is going to be celebrated, or is it something that we're going to look back and say, well, there were these things that perhaps if they were done differently in this period would have a very different impact on what we are seeing in the future?
Over and above the demonetization process and what we've seen in the last 4 months, what the CBK governor has actually been able to achieve during his tenure is actually commendable. We've been able to see a lot of issues. Well, his tenure has been riddled with a lot of issues, collapse of 2 key banks, Imperial and Chase Bank. And we've seen how the whole 10 years process has been. We've seen the end result of what has happened to Imperial Bank and Chase Bank, which happened yesterday with KICD saying that they're going to increase the amount in terms of how much depositors can be able to be paid back. So in short, I believe the CBK governor has been able to achieve a lot during his tenure in terms of being able to ensure that the law has been followed, being able to ensure that the banks are able to actually adhere to the set down CBK guidelines and any other public financial management aspect. But the interesting thing is that for me, as an analyst and the research aspect in the economy, has been the issue of illicit cash flow, wash. And this is something that even personally, when I did speak to him a while back, it's something that I would like to see more being done about it. My colleague says that my theory about it, the 3.2% is actually blown out of proportion. But in essence, 7 billion shillings is actually a lot, given when you look at the broader aspect of how the economy is performing, when you look at how manufacturing is, when you look at how the financial sector is, when you look at how the construction sector is, the issue of illicit money and wash per se is actually of great concern. And as I put it, the 7 billion could actually be some of the money, most of which could be held by the banks, because I don't think Central Bank has released a clear report on the whole process. And it's premature to actually speculate on issues whereby when the report comes out, we'll end up looking like we're not really thinking. So for me, I'm looking forward to a complete report to actually see how much money is being held by the banks, how much money is being held by the public, how much money was actually in the police station and in the court system, and so forth, so that we can be able to understand the true audit of the financial aspect. But in a nutshell, I think he's done pretty well. He's been able to ensure that the law is followed. And I think going forward, the issue is now to streamline the financial sector, work in close relationship with National Treasury to ensure that the banking sector is doing well, bring into regulation the mobile money aspect, because we've seen mobile lending has actually taken over a lot of the issue of credit access in the system. So there are a lot of issues that the governor still needs to work on, but he will need support, and especially political support from our parliament, especially in terms of the issue of lifting the cap on the interest rate, the issue of do we let the mobile money lenders self-regulate, or do we regulate them? So yes, he's in the right direction. He's doing something. This process of the last 4 months has seen that he can actually push it through with minimum disruption to the economy. So for me, I think before the end of his term, I'd like to see a lot more being done in the system.
Thank you for that, Steve. And finally, I'd like to get your final thoughts, Tony, as well, on some of what Steve has shared, as well as your final closing remarks on the entire demonetization process.
Okay. On CBK's tenure, the governor's tenure, I think it depends on how you look at it. But we can say that in terms of prudential guidelines, in terms of monitoring and supervising banks and the banking institution, I think he's done a pretty good job, because we've seen that quite a number of laws that were not implemented before and policies. I think CBK has been able, as the governor himself, in the leadership of CBK, has able to streamline banks. And the kind of speculative behavior and predatory lending that we used to see, I think, has been tamed. The other aspect will be, I think, which was an indictment on him, was about the Kenya shilling, that IMF said it's a managed currency. I think that was an indictment in him, but in this, I think in the past months, we've seen that there is some volatility within the shilling. It means that I think it's more of a market-driven. It's left for the market to determine rather than CBK intervening at every point in time. So I think so far so good. I think he's had a good time. He's had a good time within the CBK, at the helm of the CBK. And we can only hope the best for him at that office itself. Okay. So my final comments, I think, on the demonetization will be that we need to look at, I think there is quite premature, I think this point is we've done monitoring of the demonetization, and we are going to the evaluation phase. One of the things that we'll want to look at the evaluation phase is that how many, has there been a rise in digital transactions during this 4-month period? Has there been new bank accounts during this 4-month period? I think those are the things that are indicators that can help us understand, were there money outside the financial system, the formal system itself, that came into the formal system? And that's a very common thing that we try to look at when you're analyzing demonetization, and if it had a structural effect in the economy
Absolutely.
itself. But I think generally about liquidity problem, I think Steve is talking about, the economy has a different problem itself, despite saying that it's the illicit money that is made the economy not work well. The economy has its own issues and fundamental issues, yeah.
All right, Tony, I'm going to have to wrap it up right here, of course, because of time constraints. But thank you both for joining me. That is economists Steve Biko and Tony Watima giving us their thoughts on the whole demonetization process this evening on The Big Story. I'm Malika Kazia. Thank you so much for tuning in. Of course, stay right here with us because KTN Prime is coming up and Sharon Momani has all the latest news throughout the day for you right here.